I want to take a moment to acknowledge the achievement of our Rollins College Democracy Project students who won the award for collective leadership, which recognizes an organization that has had a significant impact on Rollins and the greater community. Even more exciting, 5 Democracy Project students won the FIA Lux Award. Chloe White, Daniel Elliott, Kyle Bennett, Omar Sadik, and Alexis Matten. The award honors outstanding Rollins seniors for their positive contribution to the campus and community in the areas of academics, leadership, inclusion, and service. The recipients are recognized as the most established and honorable leaders on campus, and Chloe and Daniel are here with us today. If there are any elected officials in the room or anyone who has declared and is running for office, please come to the side mic and announce yourselves and what position you are running for. And we ask if everyone would please keep your applause until the end. Thank you.
I'm Todd Weaver, and I'm formerly your vice mayor here in Winter Park, and I'm back to being a commissioner, and I'm happy to say that we unanimously voted for Sheila DeCiccio to be our new vice mayor. Thank you for all of you for being here.
Hello, I'm Marty Sullivan, a commissioner for City of Winter Park. Sign the petition for clean and healthy water in Florida, please. Thank you.
Good morning. I am former State Representative Carlos Guillermo Smith. Thank you. And I'm proud to say I am an active candidate for State Senate District 17, Orange County. Thank you.
Afternoon, I'm Doug Walker. I'm a county judge here in Orange County, Florida.
Good afternoon. I am Allison Carestes, and I am a circuit judge here in the Ninth Circuit.
Good morning. I'm Stephanie Vanos, and I filed this morning to run for Orange County School Board District 6.
Now, we'd like to thank our platinum sponsor, Climate First Bank, for supporting this event. We have with us today Senior Vice Presidents Chris Kusi and Scott Leitner. Thank you all. The mission of Climate First Bank is to do the right thing for the planet, people, community, and their shareholders. As a mission-driven organization, Climate First Bank is honored to sponsor this event and believes conversations like today's are more important than ever. You can speak with them today about how you can use your finance as a force for good and the impact of voting with your wallet. Take a moment, visit the Climate First Bank table right over in the corner. Gosh, as the league president, I want to thank our communications committee, Diana Smith, Carol Savage, who you will see walking around with a camera, and Lisa Adkins, who sends out our newsletters, but they also gave today's event a very special touch. So thank you all. We appreciate you so much. And I would be remiss as president of the largest league, but an organization focused on voter education, if I didn't also mention our Clean Water Ballot Initiative, and also that the league has signed on in support of a constitutional amendment to put abortion on the ballot in 2024. petitions can be found both on your table and also at the table in the corner. You can sign them, drop them in the box, and we will take care of them from there. Please note, signing the petition does not express your support or opposition for abortion. It gets it on the ballot, and we let the voters decide from there. And now, let's get to the program. The past session of the Florida legislature has been stunning by all accounts. Controversial legislation that would have been unlikely just years ago swiftly passed through committees and were signed into law. There is no doubt that the effects are wide-ranging. Some laws will be challenged in court, but that takes time. But first, we want to understand the scope of what has been done. So for this hot topic session, we put together a panel of seasoned journalists who come from different perspectives and follow the action in Tallahassee. We turn to Latoya Davis, Jason Garcia, Christopher Heath, and Skylar Swisher to talk about the 2023 session, how these laws came about, the effects, and what lies ahead for our great state of Florida. Our moderator today will be none other than the Patty Brigham. After several years at We Care Inc., a suicide prevention and crisis intervention center, Patty forged a career in radio and worked as a reporter, writer, and producer, at which time she was recognized with several awards from media organizations including American Women in Radio and Television and the Associated Press. After joining the League of Women Voters of Orange County in 2013, Patty quickly assumed leadership duties, including forming the local league's Gun Safety Action Team, which later went statewide. She also joined the League of Women Voters Orange County Board of Directors. In the days following the 2016 mass shooting at the Pulse nightclub, Patty partnered with then League of Women Voters Florida President Pamela Goodman to form the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, which included more than 100 organizational partners. The coalition is now a nonprofit organization, Prevent Gun Violence Florida, which Patty chairs. Patty became president of the League of Women Voters of Florida in 2018 and served for 3 years. Patty grew up right here in Orlando and attended the University of Florida, go Knights, where she earned a BA in philosophy and an MA in liberal studies. Let us give a warm welcome to Patty Brigham.
Thank you so much for inviting me today. It's a true pleasure and delight to be back in my home league of Orange County. And so I am not going to waste any time getting to the program because this legislative session we saw an incredible number of bills. We have spent a number of hours going through the bills and deciding which ones we're going to discuss with our esteemed panel. So the first thing I'd like to do is introduce those panelists. Latoya Dennis from WMFE Radio. Yay, Latoya. Latoya has been news director and managing editor at WMFE in leadership roles from training and mentoring newsroom fellows to co-executive producing an Edward R. Murrow award-winning series called Project Milwaukee. Her work has appeared on such shows as PBS NewsHour, Marketplace, Here and Now, Only a Game, and Morning Edition. Since 2020, Latoya has been a board member of the Public Media Journalists Association, and she holds a bachelor's degree and a master's degree in journalism from Michigan State University. Next up, Christopher Heath from WFTV TV, our ABC affiliate. Christopher is head of investigations at Channel 9, and he's also the political reporter, having covered the Florida legislature for the last decade. In his career, Chris has covered news from evacuations in New Orleans following Hurricane Katrina to deploying with the 4th Infantry Division to Iraq. Christopher holds a bachelor's degree in broadcast journalism from the University of North Texas and a master's degree in digital marketing from Northern Illinois University. Next up, Skylar Swisher with the Orlando Sentinel. Skylar is a reporter for the Sentinel, and he has covered this past legislative session in the Florida legislature. He's been reporting on most of the hot-button issues that affect Florida's voters. His most recent stories include Disney's legal and power struggles, allowing concealed carry permit holders to ditch the permit and training requirements, the 6-week abortion ban, and assaults on open records law. Swisher graduated with a BA in journalism and political science from the University of Tennessee. And last but not least, Jason Garcia, who is a multimedia investigative reporter. Jason is one of Florida's leading investigative journalists and the publisher of Seeking Rents, a newsletter and podcast that explores the ways business influence public policy. The winner of multiple state and national awards, Garcia is author of Big Profits, Tiny Taxes, which exposed how corporations dodge taxes, and a 2021 series about dark money used in a ghost candidate election scheme. He previously worked for the Orlando Sentinel and Florida Trend magazine. So we welcome our panelists to the stage. We've asked them to keep their remarks and answers to 2 minutes, and that's because we've got a jam-packed program. So let's get started. For the first question is the one that is very relevant to our organization, and that is Senate Bill 7050, which was the elections package. I'd like to focus on how this package will affect voters and third-party registration organizations like the League. Christopher, I'm going to put that question to you.
I mean, in short, what it's going to do is decrease the time that organizations have to go out and register voters. It also hikes up a lot of the fines if you color outside of the lines. There's a lot of this that was built in is designed to both, from the state's aspect, make it harder for outside organizations to register voters, and then also make it harder for outside organizations, third-party organizations, to then go and work with those voters as we approach Election Day. It puts a lot of stumbling blocks out there for supervisors of elections offices. And when I say that, I mean a lot of them are going to have to hire more staff, or the staff they have are going to have to work longer hours to comply with some of these provisions. And then, stepping beyond just the third party, there's also written into it a lot of the ways that it approaches voters, most notably the state essentially tacitly admitting that it screwed up with the implementation of restoring rights to felons when it said, okay, if you go register, we will let you know if you're good to vote. Then all of a sudden we start arresting people for it, and they're saying, well, we can't, it's not our fault. You told us we were good to vote. This comes back and says, okay, well, when you go to register, you're telling us you're good to vote. We're not telling you you're good to vote. So it's got a lot packed in it. Oh, yes, and it also got rid of the resign to run just in case the governor wants to run for president. So I hope that it covers everything that was in this 92-page bill that essentially got introduced to the committee the day before the first committee vote. That's what happened.
Thank you. And of course, we imagine some court cases are going to come out of this.
Yeah, there's attorneys who don't even have kids yet that'll be putting them through college on this thing.
Okay, let's move along. There were more than 20 bills targeting the LGBTQ and trans community. Now, we don't have time to focus on each specific bill, but I wanted to make sure you knew the vast number of attacks against this vulnerable community. Some of these bills have already been approved and sent to the governor for his signature, and we're very interested in what the ramifications would be for our LGBTQ and trans communities. So first, I'll turn to LaToya for that question.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I would say that there's actually a trial happening now over one of these bills when it comes to
Medicaid and it being used to cover costs for transgender children, right? That's underway right now. Legally, I'm sure there will be lots of lawsuits that are filed. There's lots to come. There were so many bills, some of them that have not yet been signed. But I'm interested in what it means for the people right now, what it means for people who are watching this, and people who are impacted by this. And some people have said we're just simply leaving the state of Florida, right? They're exiting. Some are leaving now, some are planning to leave, within several months, right? People are scared and they don't know what this means. And so they're rallying and they're looking really for hope wherever they can grasp it. And that's what I'm hearing, right? Florida isn't alone in this, right? You look across the country and there are lots of states where this sort of legislation is being pushed through and signed into law by governors. And so I think it remains to be seen where it goes, but I think there's one thing that we can guarantee, and that is there are many lawsuits to come.
Yes, I'm sure you're right about that. Skylar, would you weigh on this, please?
Yeah, sure. So I was at the Capitol, and I heard, the protesters, and what they told me is they really feel like they're being demonized, that they're essentially being used as political pawns by the governor who has presidential ambitions, and they liken their struggle to the civil rights movement. One piece of legislation was the expansion of what critics call the "Don't Say Gay" bill, and that limits the discussion of sexual orientation and gender identity. And what they're saying is happening is there's a chilling effect. So, any sort of book in a school library that has to do with LGBTQ topics is getting flagged. So they're saying that, this legislation is having some pretty far-reaching consequences.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that. Let's move to House Bill 31. Now, this is a joint resolution out of the legislature that would go, if approved, on the ballot in 2024. It would make our school boards partisan. Now, we all know that our school boards, depending on which county we're in, are currently the scenes of very contentious meetings. So, Christopher, I'm going to ask you this. How do you foresee in the future that if voters approve this amendment to the ballot, how is this going to affect our school boards and their relationships with the community and the schools?
Well, as you mentioned, this is a joint resolution, so voters will get to weigh in on this. And of course, in Florida, 60% is required to amend the state constitution. So voters will get to decide if this is something they want. If we have partisan elections, essentially now, when somebody runs for school board, instead of just running on their name and what they want to do, they'll be able to put an R or D after it. I think what you saw in this last election cycle where the governor came out and was explicit about, I'm going to endorse school board candidates up and down the ballot in races I want to be involved in. I'm not only going to endorse them, but we're also going to funnel money to them. And on election night, he had a pretty good evening getting these people elected. I think at this point, we are already aware where people stand politically on our school board. This, I think, takes it just to that next step where there's no more guessing. You don't have to go look at somebody and find out that they're a member of, this group and that group, and therefore they lean right, or they're with this group and that group and they lean left. You can now just look and see R&D. Does it kind of deteriorate what we have in nonpartisan elections? We'll have to wait and see if voters go for this and what happens downstream. But this is, again, something that voters will have to weigh in on. And 60% is a pretty hefty threshold. So it's yet to be determined if this actually gets into the Constitution.
Quick follow-up, Christopher. If this passes, how is this going to affect the school boards when it comes to Moms for Liberty?
Well, technically they are an independent group, and obviously they would then just fold probably nicely into some of the groups that they already align with, which is notably the GOP. They were kind of the arm of DeSantis during this. A lot of these were members within that. So it essentially kind of takes that the next step and says, we're not even going to have to kind of dance around whether or not this is right or left. We're just going to let you know up front, these are all the Republicans, these are all the Democrats, and we're going to start to see school boards that look a lot more like what we see legislatively, which is certain counties are ruby red and others are bright blue, and they will be governed in different ways.
Thank you. And staying on the subject of education, House Bill 1 was a monster. on universal vouchers, and of course the League has been involved in education and advocating for public education for many years now. Now, with the onset of changes to higher education in K through 12 with universal vouchers, first turning to you, Jason, can you explain how this law will affect our schools in general?
Yeah, well, that's... Oh, okay, yeah. That is quite possibly the most interesting question coming out of session, because there were just dramatic differences in the estimates on this. So the Florida Policy Institute, which is a pretty well-respected but left-of-center economic analysis outfit, estimated $4 billion would be the impact of this. That's an enormous amount of money, even in the context of Florida's public education budget. The House of Representatives somehow came up with an estimate of just like $200 million, which was laughably low. Among other things, it assumed that wealthy families that are paying to send their kids to expensive private schools wouldn't take free money from the state. And you can sort of tell that the House didn't even believe its own estimate, in that the legislature has this panel of independent state economists whose job is to score legislation. If it's going to have an impact on the state budget, it's their job to figure out what it is, because you need to know this stuff to be able to pass a balanced budget every year. The House refused to send House Bill 1 to this panel. They would not let them score this legislation. So what they've done instead is they've stuck a bunch of money in reserve to cover when their estimates invariably prove to be incredibly low, right? But it is looking like an enormous impact. And if it hits $4 billion like the Florida Policy Institute thinks, I mean, they're going to have to come back and deal with it immediately. They cannot absorb that the way things are right now.
A quick follow-up, if I may, Jason, on the higher ed piece of this. Of course, we saw that hostile takeover of New College in Sarasota. This is for all of you, but Jason in particular, do you foresee any more of these types of hostile takeovers of our public higher ed institutions?
Yes. Yeah, I mean, it is happening as we speak, even at the University of Florida. So a lot of the focus has been on New College. New College, among other things, was given $25 million in just utterly unrestricted cash to spend for Richard Corcoran and Chris Rufo to spend however they see fit, right? No other university gets that sort of thing. But also in this same budget, they threw, I believe it was $10 million in recurring unrestricted cash at an outfit they've just created at the University of Florida called the Hamilton Center. And what this is essentially a college within a college at UF that is its own autonomous body. It will handle its own sort of admissions and this sort of thing. And it is designed to be like Governor DeSantis will repeatedly refer to Hillsdale College, the small private conservative Christian college in Michigan. This is designed to be a Hillsdale within the UF campus. So it's already happening.
Chris,
and all this.
Jason, I'm sorry, 2 minutes. Thank you.
Just to dovetail into that, I mean, one of the things we started doing is calling around to universities and asking some of the professors we know, just on background, are you having trouble hiring professors? And a lot of them were saying, yeah, we're not getting the number of applications for professors. Some of that is the cut down on the tenure track, but a lot of it is there is within the law basically the law is structured so that the government, if you work for the government, controls your speech in certain things. That is, if you work for the DMV, the state of Florida can tell you what you're allowed to say as a representative of the DMV. That extends also to K-12. Courts have held that for a long time. Currently, the state of Florida is pushing this issue and saying, no, we extend this to all government employees, and that includes faculty at universities. Now, the courts have held for a long time that faculty at universities are supposed to have robust discussions and not be told from top down what they're allowed to say and what they're allowed to teach. The state is really trying to clamp down on that. Once again, we are going to start to see faculty that could come here or go to another state, if all things being equal, might end up going to another state because they don't want to be told what they're going to have to say and they don't like having the tenure pulled away. At a certain point, this will start to come back on higher education. We're starting to see a little bit of it now. Going forward, it's going to be interesting to see where this thing plays itself out.
Thank you. And ironically, I believe I read that U.S. News and World Report just ranked Florida #1 in education. I wonder if that's going to last. I doubt it. Okay. Now, let's turn to probably one of the most controversial bills this legislative session, certainly for women, and that was Senate Bill 300, the abortion bill. And of course, this bill has the potential to do enormous damage to health care for women and families in general, quite frankly. So, LaToya, where do you see this law heading, particularly since there is a court case already underway?
Yeah, I suppose as the lone woman up here, this one is mine, right? As you mentioned, there is a court case right now against Florida's 15-week abortion ban, and that 6-week law could not go into play. It cannot take effect until this court case is cleared up with the 15-week ban, which is basically over privacy and whether abortion is guaranteed in the Florida Constitution. At this point, it's with the Supreme Court, and we don't know when the Florida Supreme Court is actually going to take this up, right? Movement seems slow, and it's at their will, although we know it's with them and that they will take this. Ultimately, what this means, though, at this point, even, right, is that people are confused, right? Because they're not sure whether it's 15 weeks, whether it's 6 weeks, whether it's 24 weeks, what is the law here, right? And so I think there needs to be messaging around what the actual law is, and right now it is 15 weeks, right? But also, once this is decided, right, if the 15-week law is upheld, then that 6-week law will take effect within 30 days, and then from there, we'll see if there are additional lawsuits filed over. I'm not sure on what grounds they would challenge, but I'm sure that there are lawyers out there who are already looking at ways to challenge that, right? Again, Florida is not the only state, but what is interesting about Florida's 6-week law is that it is one of the most restrictive in the country, right? It does have exceptions, but 6 weeks, it's not a lot of time, as we all know. So that's where we are with that one. It remains to be seen what will happen with that. But right now, the 15-week law still is in play.
Right, and most women don't even know they're pregnant at 6 weeks. So this is essentially a full-out abortion ban. They're not fooling anybody up there. So let's move over to another very dangerous bill to our public safety in general, and that is permitless carry, which came out of the House Bill 543. This bill, of course, is very close to my heart since I work on gun violence prevention. Now, during committee debate on this bill, it was really surreal to see gun advocates from this far-right group called Gun Owners of America blast the Republicans on the committee panels and the governor, saying, you lied to us, this is not true constitutional carry, which they consider to be open carry, you are liars, we're going to vote you out of office. It was quite interesting, to say the least. So what happened? Permitless carry, not open carry, but this is permitless carry with a concealed firearm. That means training goes away, and that background check when you apply for the permit goes away. We know that Florida already has over 2.6 million concealed weapons holders. So Skylar, I know that you have done quite a bit of coverage of this bill, which takes effect July 1st. Could you talk a bit about it for us?
Yeah, so permitless carry, what that means is that if you want to carry a concealed weapon in public, you no longer have to go through any sort of training. You no longer have to do a background check. So, if you are a lawful gun owner, you can legally carry your concealed weapon in public. It does keep some of the gun-free spaces. For instance, schools, actually legislative meetings are gun-free. But this is a big change. I mean, I did some research back in the early 80s. You had to show that you had a compelling reason in some counties for carrying a concealed weapon. I think Broward County had something like a dozen permits, and now it's you don't even have to go through any sort of permitting process.
Right, and I believe one of the Central Florida reps, I think it was Anna Escamani, tried to amend the bill. Hey there, tried to amend the bill to allow carrying in these legislative committee rooms and chambers, and of course that got, no pun intended, shot down right away. Good try. So I have it here that Christopher, you might want to weigh in on this permitless carry bill as well.
But I mean, this is where when we talk about permitless carry versus, and you mentioned this, the difference between constitutional carry, which obviously, many gun rights groups were saying, no, we want full, constitutional carry. The Florida Sheriff's Association and some other law enforcement agencies were not comfortable with going that far because you did hear some, contours within, especially parts of the legislature. And even the governor came out and said, well, if they'll give me, constitutional carry, I'll sign it. Let's be frank here. If the governor wants a bill passed in the legislature, he'll get a bill passed. So there is some pushback on this. Now, how long that stays there and how much, the political willpower resists that is yet to be determined. But that's the next step of all of this.
Just a quick follow-up. What about his recent words that he might call a special session on open carry?
He might. I mean, there's nothing stopping. I open this to the entire dais. I mean, we had 2 on property insurance. We had, 2 more on Disney. It took the legislature 6 months to name strawberry shortcake the official dessert. It took them 3 days to get rid of Reedy Creek. I'm not making that up. Go look it up. Strawberry shortcake, 6 months. So yeah, I mean, if he wants it, it'll get done, and that'll be it.
Personally, I would have voted for key lime pie, but that's me. Okay, Jason Garcia. Now, Jason writes a lot about the intersection of business and politics, and he's been tracking, or he was tracking, a number of bills that aren't well known, and we believe that they should be better known. And they will impact the rights of Floridians. So we're going to talk about some of these. The first one in particular, Jason, I'd like to ask you about is the preemption of local authority. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, they did a lot of preemption, as they've been doing for a number of years. There was small stuff like, for instance, Walmart started trying to fly delivery drones out of the parking lot of a neighborhood Walmart center in Avalon Park. And Orange County said you were going to have to get some zoning changes to do that. So they just went to the legislature and got a bill passed that says local governments can't regulate drone delivery services, right? But in terms of preemption, there were probably 2 sort of really big bills that passed this year. The first, which from an economic perspective, I would argue is the single worst bill passed this session, is they invalidated every local tenants' rights ordinance that has been adopted around the state. And these are ordinances that just give like bare bones protections to renters. Things like you have to get a notice a month in advance before a landlord raises your rent by more than 5%, or these sorts of things, or a landlord can't discriminate based on your source of income, right? They threw all of these out, and they completely and forever prohibited cities and counties from regulating any aspect of the landlord-tenant relationship. And on the other end, they sort of got ahead of all future sort of stuff, but they passed this bill that essentially allows a business to delay the implementation of any ordinance it doesn't like by suing and alleging that it is arbitrary or capricious. And so this law says if they file a suit, the city or county has to stop enforcing that ordinance until the suit is resolved. And this is coupled with the fact they added, I think Skylar is going to talk about a subject called one-way attorney fees in a bit, but they added one-way attorney fees to this. So a business, if they sue and they win, the city or county has to pay their attorney fees, but it's not the business, if they lose, doesn't have to pay the city or county's attorney fees. So there is essentially no downside. If there's an ordinance passed that you don't like, there is no downside to filing a lawsuit saying, hey, that's arbitrary, and that at minimum you're going to delay it for a few months.
Thank you. That was great. Very succinct. I didn't want to play a bad cop like the chairs up in the legislative session who only give you 10 seconds to speak if you're lucky. So moving on, Jason, can you talk about some of the economic issues, particularly those, you mentioned the anti-renter, and there's anti-worker bills, anti-consumer bills. What's going on?
Yeah, there's we could spend a few hours just on this sort of stuff. So I mean, like for instance, they screwed minor league baseball players out of the minimum wage for no reason other than Major League Baseball team owners wanted to be able to not pay these players during spring training in Florida, right? They strengthened local car dealer monopolies, which limits consumers' choices. They created liability protections for SpaceX and Blue Origin if they're negligent and their negligence contributes to explosions that kill their crew, right? There's all sorts of little stuff like that. On the most anti-worker bill of session, though, was one that the governor just signed, and it essentially it is essentially designed to abolish most public sector unions, and it imposes all sorts of restrictions on unions that represent teachers and 911 dispatchers and nurses. It was also the subject of the single biggest lie of session, where the sponsors of this bill, which was written by a number of conservative dark money organizations, but the sponsors kept claiming they were trying to protect teachers and protect public sector workers by ensuring transparency in how their unions operated, except they did not provide any of these same protections to the unions representing police officers, firefighters, or prison guards, which tend to be the unions that support Republicans. So, I mean, it was just utterly about busting unions that support Democrats and obliterating protections for public sector workers other than those that are friendly to Republicans.
Including teachers, right?
Oh yeah, the teachers were, I mean, the bill was initially referred to internally as teacher paycheck protection, so it was specifically targeted at the teachers union, but, you know, the shrapnel takes in unions representing, you know, cafeteria workers, bus drivers, all sorts of other folks.
Okay, thank you. Then there was House Bill 837, and this is not as well known either, and I'm going to address this. I believe you wanted to take this, Christopher, or Skylar? Skylar, okay. Now, this is a tort reform bill, and it was approved to encourage insurance companies to continue doing business in Florida, but it limits claims and court actions against carriers. So how is this going to affect citizens?
Yeah, so this is a big deal, and this is going to have a lasting effect on Florida, and it didn't get a ton of attention. You know, a lot of these types of bills get overshadowed by some of the social issues. But, you know, plaintiff lawyers are saying it's going to make it a lot harder to sue an insurance company, for instance. You know, in the past, if you sued an insurance company, you know, you would get your attorney fees back if you prevailed in the lawsuit. So for the most part, they're doing away with that. So if you have a dispute, let's say over, you know, $1,000 or $2,000, would it make sense to go hire a lawyer to sue the insurance company? There's also opposition from a pretty diverse group. There were bikers who were mad about this. There was like Parkland victims who were mad because if you have personal injury lawsuits, the way that those damages are going to be tallied could basically de-incentivize those sorts of lawsuits. For instance, if you're deemed to be, you know, more than 51% responsible for your accident, you don't get anything. So let's say you're not wearing a helmet, you're a motorcycle, you know, someone runs a stop sign and hits you, you wouldn't be able to recoup, you know, if you're deemed to be more than 51% at fault.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, I just wanted to throw one other thing in this. This was one of the funnier little ironies of this session where they spent so much, so much lightning and thunder about Disney. This tort reform bill included a provision that caps the way damages are calculated in negligence cases. That is a bill Disney has been lobbying for more than a decade, and they finally got it. In a year that we were, I guess, punishing Disney.
Yeah, and that leads to my question about Disney. Disney's become quite a bone of contention for our governor, and of course Disney is suing Governor DeSantis, who is countersuing, and now Disney has expanded its lawsuit. There were several bills targeting Disney, such as the monorail inspection bill, Reedy Creek contract, the new board, and there are two tracks of lawsuits, and one is in federal court. So, LaToya, I'm going to put this to you first. What does this mean to the Central Florida communities? We would be nothing without that employer.
Yeah, you know, Disney is the largest employer here in Central Florida, one of the largest employers in the state, right? And so I know lots of people who are concerned about this legislation, these laws, and these lawsuits, right? What it means for all of us, right, whether in Central Florida or not, is a heck of a lot of money spent on lawsuits, right? I do believe, Jason, you were doing some reporting that, you know, within 3 days of something being signed into law or Disney filing suit, that the legislature upped the budget for lawyers.
Yeah, that's right. They
right?
tripled his budget for lawyers 3 days after Disney sued him.
Yeah, to what I believe to $6 million, right? So it's going to mean a lot of money spent on that. But here in Central Florida, people are concerned about what does this mean, and we're not sure yet. But Disney has a lot of land, right? They have a lot of land that is not yet developed, right? Do they have to do more? they don't, right? So it's all speculation at this point. No one knows what this means, but I think everyone is concerned about what this means when it comes to economic development, when it comes to the jobs of the people who work there and every other business, right? Because those people spend money at local businesses, right? So I think there's just lots of concern at this point.
Absolutely. Christopher?
I'll take it a step further. There is a question out there, and you can almost compartmentalize Disney on a whole separate track and just say, if we can do this to Disney, when I say we, I mean the state government can do this to Disney, what else can they do to a private company, private business? The precedent on this is chilling. And I had a long conversation with a good friend of mine who's very, very Republican, but he looked at this and he says, this is concerning because it assumes that Republicans will always have the power in Tallahassee and Democrats will never be in charge and be able to then turn this around and go after, oh, I don't know, the last coal-fired power plant that we don't like in town or a shooting range. Take your list of things that maybe Democrats would love to go Reedy Creek on. We can say that. And, but I mean, that's where this goes. And as far as the litigation goes, you mentioned with state court and federal court, neither one of these plays itself very well to the state's hand, both in the bills they've passed, but more importantly, the things that people have said. When you look at the new Central Florida Tourism Board, these are all people who have come out and flat said, we are going to monitor Disney's content and how they're conducting themselves and then make decisions about their land. Now ask yourself, if that got played out for another business, would we all be comfortable? That's where I think this is an issue that you're going to see some more libertarian-leaning Republicans step back and say, I'm not comfortable with the state government exerting this much authority and this much oversight and being this heavy-handed with a private company.
And is it completely accurate to say that this all came about, this sort of retribution against Disney from the governor because of the Don't Say Gay law? Jason or LaToya, either one of you, both.
Yes.
I'm gonna add sort of two things actually happened. Disney spoke out against Don't Say Gay, but it also announced it would stop making campaign contributions in Florida, and you know it had given more than $100,000 to Ron DeSantis in just the previous 2 years. So I don't think you can overlook the financial aspect of that as well.
Okay, thank you both. So anything else that we want to cover about Disney, because this is critically important to our area, to our economy, to the people who live here. Did we leave anything out about Disney that we need to hone in on a little bit more? No? Okay. Now, natural resources, a critically important issue in Florida. Certainly to our league members who are very engaged with our environment and working to combat climate change. So, Skylar, I would like to put this one to you, which is House Bill 3, the ESG Environmental Social Governance Bill. What's that all about?
Yeah, so this somewhat fits into the whole Disney story. So ESG is environment, social governance. And there's, investment funds that consider these factors when making investment decisions. Well, this has drawn the ire of Governor DeSantis, and his position is that they're essentially imposing their ideology, and this is something that the political players should be doing, not, money managers. So he basically is blocking state and local retirement funds from investing in this ESG. So it kind of represents, kind of this new brand of conservatism where you're using state power. In the past, it was kind of a hands-off approach toward business, and now politicians are much more likely to use, state power to try to impose their, their social agenda.
Jason?
Yeah, and I just wanted to add, this is sort of one of those classic bills that's a culture war that's actually sort of masquerading as a corporate favor as well, because a lot of the focus has been on the investing provisions, the ESG provisions in this bill, but there's also language in there that essentially punishes any bank that refuses to lend to a business based on its business sector, right? And that all comes right after all the big banks said they would stop banking, they would stop lending to private prison companies, including the GEO Group, which is one of the biggest donors in Florida, biggest campaign contributors to the governor directly and to the Republican Party as a whole. So this bill was very clearly designed to help the GEO Group as well.
Anyone else want to weigh in on that? I heard some groans in the audience. You mentioned the culture wars. There have been a lot of editorials. I've heard lawmakers say this, you know, what are we doing in Tallahassee? Why are we going after the LGBTQ and trans community? Why are we going after our higher education institutions? Why are we going after public schools? What is this hostile takeover of New College? What's going on? So it does seem that these are culture wars. And so what are our legislators and our governor avoiding by focusing solely on culture wars? And I want to ask each one of you for a response on that. LaToya, I'll start with you.
I wasn't prepared for that one.
Sometimes you get thrown a sideball, curveball.
You do. How to answer this? What they are avoiding. These are issues that get people riled up, right? And that get people to the polls, right? And I don't know if it's something that they're avoiding, but I think there's lots of talk about DeSantis making a presidential run, right? And we all know that 2024 is a presidential election year. And so he has tons of name recognition, right? People are talking about him all over the country. He's put forth a lot of legislation and got it passed with a legislature that's very favorable to him, which plays well amongst a national audience when looking at him. He's gotten some wins, a lot of wins. And so if he does run, that can't hurt him, right? That can only help him. So I'm not sure if it's avoiding anything. Very well could be, but it definitely keeps him in the media in a way that's very positive for conservatives.
Thank you. Sorry to put you on the spot.
No worries.
Christopher, go ahead.
So hard problems are hard to solve, easy problems are easy to solve. The easiest problem to solve is one that's pretty much not even there. We can solve that pretty quickly. The thing is that what we have in the state right now is some substantial issues that the state has kind of sort of deal with, but they're very difficult. And the biggest one is one we've covered extensively, and that's property insurance. We've had 6 companies, private companies, become insolvent in the last 2 years. Citizens Property Insurance, which is the state-backed insurer of last resort, has 1.2 million policies and growing. Meanwhile, the existing private carriers are all asking for double-digit, and they're getting it, property increases on insurance. Citizens is asking for 14%, 2% above what it's allowed to ask for by statute. That's just its exposure right now. These are the kind of problems that the state kind of would like to deal with, but they're hard. There's no good solution. They pumped $3 billion into reinsurance through 2 special sessions last year. That didn't do the trick. This was a problem they should have dealt with 10 years ago. They chose not to. Now we're at this point. They haven't dealt with that. They haven't dealt with affordable housing. They haven't dealt with the fact that we are seeing saltwater intrusion. They haven't dealt with the fact that we see flooding along the coast. There are some legitimate problems out there that do not care who you voted for in the last election, but they're difficult. They take time, and some of them, frankly, are kind of boring. Nobody wants to look at an actuary table for 10 hours, but you kind of have to do that if you want to deal with insurance. And this is where the state is at. So the things that get clicks online, the things that get you booked on, you know, the major cable networks, the things that get you on Twitter trending are not finding new ways to subsidize reinsurance. It's these other things. And I hate to say this because I think all of us in this room are voters. We elect these people. There's an election coming up in November, next November, but it's coming up. It's up to us to decide if this is where we want to keep going and maybe convince a friend or two to vote with us. That's where it comes down to. So if we're not happy with the direction of the state, there's no election.
Thank you. Skylar?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just kind of build off what Chris said. And I think if you're a politician and if you want to motivate somebody to vote, one of the things you can appeal to is anger. So I think there's this tendency in politics to try to anger people because it's a good way to get people to act. So you're saying, look, they're trying to go against everything that you hold dear. I mean, they want to have drag shows in your kid's school, It's a lot easier to try to fire those issues up than some of these really difficult issues to deal with, such as the property insurance, which is affecting everybody in Florida, such as people's rent going up, which is affecting a ton of people in Florida, such as gun violence, where we have, mass shootings on almost a weekly basis, and also, healthcare, where we have people in a very affluent society who have access to no health care in the state of Florida. So I think those are some of the issues that would be much more complicated and difficult to address, and it's much easier just to kind of to get people riled up through some of these culture war issues.
Thank you. Jason?
Yeah, and I would say these big, loud issues that are designed to anger and scare people are designed to distract from three things. It's designed to distract from the unpopular things that they do. So we talked about some of the stuff around workers and wages and renters, but also, just this session, they also passed a bill to build roads with radioactive phosphate waste. They passed a bill to let predatory lenders double their interest rates, right? It's to distract from that stuff. It's also to distract from the problems they can't solve, like the property insurance crisis, like the affordable housing crisis that we have in the state. They have not been able to solve these. And it's also to distract from the problems they refuse to solve. So just two quick examples of that is the state of Florida is right now in the process of kicking at least 1 million Floridians off of Medicaid because pandemic-era protections are rolling off. They passed a little bit of legislation to help some families in that situation with young children. But for most of these folks, they're out of luck now. They're back on the private market, hoping they can find some sort of insurance they can afford, and many of those people will end up going completely uninsured. And the legislature refuses to do that, which you would solve by, of course, expanding Medicaid under the Affordable Care Act. They also, a lot of this Disney diatribe and these ESG sort of things that are designed to look, tough on corporations are to distract from the fact that they refuse to do meaningful sort of corporate accountability, like closing corporate tax loopholes. Florida has the easiest to avoid corporate profits tax in the country, and they refuse to reform it, even though there is an obvious reform. It's a policy known as combined reporting that most states have already adopted, but they refuse to pass it because the big business lobby doesn't want to do it. But they don't want folks talking about that. They want folks talking about, woke investing and illegal immigration instead.
Thank you all. I have another question that I would be remiss in not asking. We've seen, and this is another one that you guys don't know about, but you're going to be able to answer this because this is about the First Amendment. The First Amendment was certainly under attack in this legislative session. Last legislative session, this legislative session, it was under attack from all directions. So let me give you one example. Transparency in government. That's something that we all want. We believe that government should be in the sunshine. But there was a bill that allowed for the governor's travel records. Now, this bill died. Is that correct? No, the bill passed. Okay. That allowed for the governor's travel records to be kept out of the sunshine. And not only that, but it would be retroactive. So, Jason, I see you nodding your head, so I'm going to turn to you again.
Yeah, this was just an awful bill. It exempted not only the governor's travel records, but also meeting records at the governor's mansion if it doesn't involve state business, which is interesting because right as this bill was passing, the New York Times reported how he's got plans to meet with donors for his presidential campaign at the governor's mansion, right? A house that all of us own, by the way. And yeah, this bill was just breathtaking in its scope. It applies to all past, present, and future travel and meeting records. So there are a number of news organizations. I think it's Gannett that had a story that they've been waiting for 10 months now for travel records that they'd requested. This legislation will nullify that public records request. So Ron DeSantis will never have to turn those over. And so some of this is about hiding his travel that he's going to be doing as he campaigns for president while remaining governor. But a lot of it is he's about to become the subject of far more intense scrutiny than he ever has been in his life. The entire national media is about to dig into him. But now one of the natural places people would go looking for stuff is just going to be off limits.
And part of that is just simple things like who visits the governor's mansion, right? Won't that be out of the sunshine?
Yes, visitor logs to the governor's mansion are exempt under this legislation.
And apparently the reason that he gives for that is for his personal safety?
Yeah, I mean, none of the, like a lot of these bills, none of the sort of public rationale holds up to any sort of scrutiny, right? So they talked about, like, the folks would zero in on why were we making this retroactive? Why not, okay, exempt it until the travel happens or until the meeting happens. And they would claim that folks could, well, you could go like retcon sort of future travel patterns based on past ones, but none of that has anything to do with who you met with or just where you were, right? Nobody's asking for like what FDLE's like security operation was while you were there. They just want to know where you were, who you met with.
Thank you. Anyone else want to weigh in? He's got it covered. Okay. To wrap up we're running out of time, but I really like to hone in on this. Now, there was a bill that did die, and that was the defamation bill. That would have had a profoundly negative impact on the media. And I would imagine that all of you were concerned about that bill. Many of us were concerned about that bill. So, Christopher, I'm going to ask you, could you explain that bill to those of us in the room who may not have learned a lot about it, and fortunately it was killed?
Yeah, basically, what it would have done is invited a challenge to the U.S. Supreme Court for New York Times versus Sullivan, which is something that protects us up here as journalists, insofar as public officials have a higher level to prove defamation. They have to show actual malice. The Fox News Dominion case is part of what this was all about. Dominion had to go out and basically say, Fox News knew what they were saying was lies and did it anyway. This would have invited a challenge to that. It was designed to do that. There are rumblings within the U.S. Supreme Court that there are at least a couple of justices that would like to revisit New York Times versus Sullivan. Had this bill gone through, there would have been an absolute chilling effect on any of us covering politicians, because we can have a wide discretion when covering politicians. There are certain things we take from both politicians and from official sources, including law enforcement, that we can take, and as long as we report it the way they told it to us, we are covered. This would have thrown a lot of that out had it actually gotten to the Supreme Court and been challenged. There was also a lot written about this with how it would have opened up, essentially, you could shop around for whichever court you wanted. So if you wanted to sue the Orlando Sentinel, you didn't have to sue them in Orange County. You could go up to the Panhandle and sue them up there and perhaps get a much friendlier jury and judge. The interesting thing about this is this bill got killed in no small part because conservative talk radio, conservative media took a look at it and said, whoa, 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 whoa. This may get us too. You actually had several conservative radio hosts saying, I'm all for sticking it to the liberal media, but, and that gets to be the problem of when you cut down all the laws to capture the devil, sooner or later the devil will turn around to meet you, and that's what they started to realize. So you did see a concerted effort from conservative media, especially looking at Fox News cutting a check for $750 million. How much is that? Yeah, it's $750 million. That's a lot of money. Anyway, but that's what ultimately killed this thing. Now, will another state pass it to try and get rid of New York Times versus Sullivan? Maybe. Will Florida revisit it in the next session? Maybe. But for right now, we still have a level of protection to actually cover the news and hold people accountable under the U.S. Constitution for now. Sorry, on that note of crushing morosity, thank you.
Well, that is a piece of good news that came out of Tallahassee this session, is that defamation bill was killed, and we're all very grateful for that, but we'll, as you said, Christopher, have to be watching for it to come back, because we know this legislature likes to bring things back that the constituents don't want, but that they want. So with that, I am going to thank our panel, Skylar Swisher of Orlando Sentinel, Jason Garcia, all around the state. You can read his report, Seeking Rents, Latoya Dennis with WMFE, and Christopher Heath with WFTV. Please give our panel a great round of applause. We're actually 2 minutes ahead of schedule, so I just want to take the time to say that it has never been more important to support your local newspapers, your NPR stations, watch your local commercial news stations. The news media, has become enemy number one. We need them now more than ever. We need to be informed voters, because informed voters are responsible voters. So please support the ladies and gentlemen of the media. They are the watchdogs of democracy. Thank you. Hello, may I have your attention? I missed a very important segment of our hot topics, and that is for our panelists to hear from league members with their questions. So Pat Grierson is over at the microphone to my left.
Thank you. I'm sure you all have a lot of questions. Members only, no speeches, one question.
Please line up, members only.
I'm waiting. As one of the members of the Voter Services Committee, I've actually registered Republicans and Democrats. Why the law against third-party registration? Or discouraging it, whatever their...
I think that is entirely about channeling as much of the voter registration through the two political parties where there's like an enormous fundraising imbalance, right? So it's that is entirely about sort of making it much harder for Democratic voters to register who rely a lot more heavily on third-party registration groups. I think that's the entire logic for it.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Pafford. The question I have, a lot of leaders in the state, whether it be legislative and especially in the governor's office, are described as vindictive. The state requires some of the largest areas in the state, i.e. Dade, Broward, Palm Beach, Orange, a number of other counties that happen to be more blue. They depend on those dollars helping more poor areas of the state. Was there any sense that the state was being vindictive towards those areas? For instance, if Orange County requested things of the budget, whether it be local bills, those type of things, did you sense that those priorities were discounted as compared to other areas of the state during the 2023 session?
I'm not sure that I would say that I've seen sort of budgetary vindication other than, if the seat is held by a Democrat, they're going to get a lot less money in the budget than a Republican seat. But what you did see is there is a concerted effort to take power away from blue areas. And I'll just give you one quick example. One of the most chilling bills that passed this session is they took control of the city-owned utility in Gainesville away from the Gainesville City Commission, which is, of course, Democratic controlled. Gainesville is one of the bluest cities in the state, and they gave it to a new board appointed entirely by Ron DeSantis, right? So this is taking a city-owned utility away from a city and giving it from a Democratic city and giving it to the Republican governor. There's lots of little things like that I think you're seeing happening.
The tension, I think what you're hitting on is something we've seen for several sessions going back at least 5, 6, 7 years, and that is that the growing population centers, the places that are so dynamic in our state, tend to be blue. They tend to be left of center. Yet the government, the state government, is right of center and increasingly so. That is the real tension, is that Tallahassee, it leans one way. The big cities that are, for lack of a better term, paying the bills and pulling the state forward economically are left of center. And one of them gets to supersede the other under law. And we keep seeing that time and time again. It has become more pernicious, I would say, in the last 5, 6 years than it used to be. But it is a growing kind of tension, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
Hi, thank you for coming, all of you. My name is Lorraine Robinson. I wanted to ask about what ultimately happened with a bill that was introduced in the Senate called the Ultimate Cancel Act, which would have barred any political party that had been a part of supporting slavery in the past. As far as I can tell, it kind of went away. Do you expect it to come back? Is it a real threat? What could be done about this?
Those blazing Goliaths bill.
Yeah, I think that was just a troll bill. I don't think
Yeah.
there was ever any intention of actually passing that. That was just to sort of gin up a little bit of fun online, essentially.
Yeah, I got some headlines and some clicks on Twitter. I don't think it was serious, but you never know. You never know.
They named a road after Rush Limbaugh, and I honestly thought that was supposedly just a troll job at first, too. It passed.
By the way, for point of correction, key lime is the state pie, strawberry shortcake is the state dessert. So we're covered on both.
I stand corrected.
Hi, I'm Gloria Picard, and I want to ask this question to each of you. So if you had the ability to wave a magic wand, you could have 750 warriors for democracy doing what you think needs to be done. What would you want us to do for you?
I would say read the Orlando Sentinel. I guess get informed and know your local. So much is focused on national politics. Find out who your local officials are, who your state lawmakers are, and get to know those people and what they're doing. Because a lot of times they fly under the radar because everybody's focused on the national politics in D.C.
I would take a note from Skylar here, and I would say become members of WMFE. And I would say be informed, right? Don't just look at the news we produce, look at the news that all of us up here, our stations and others are producing, right? Because I don't think anyone should live in an echo chamber. Be informed and then vote.
You don't even have to watch Channel 9. You turn it on and walk out of the room. We still get the ratings points, so I just toss that out there. But no, I think kind of what I said earlier, engage. Go talk to some friends. The idea of a representative democracy, and not to get on the soapbox here, is that we send people to D.C., we send people to Tallahassee, we send people to Orange County's commission to do the things we don't have time for. But it requires us to not just be spectators. We have to be engaged. And yes, we all have busy lives going on. We have things happening. But find out what's going on. Talk to your neighbors. Talk to your friends. You don't have to berate them. You don't have to be a keyboard warrior. But what you have to do is be engaged and willing to have that conversation with people and say, I want to talk to you about this. Or, this is important to me. By the way, there's an election coming up. Have you registered? Do you need a ride? Those kind of things. Engagement is where it all begins and ends, and I think that's the most important thing, is just to be engaged and become a force multiplier, because if it's just you, it's just you, but if it's you and 3 friends, you're up to 4.
Yeah, I would take all 750 of those warriors and put them into voter registration.
Okay, it looks like we are out of time now. Thank you again to our panel, and please say hello to our Lee Rambo. Sure, go ahead. I didn't see him. Sorry about that.
With the blue areas generating a lot of the wealth, have no representation, do you think there's an effort that could be done for undoing the gerrymandering by doing a non-partisan type commission?
Potentially. I remember there was some sort of league of women voters that helped push through fair districts, and the legislature has snubbed its nose at that now twice. So I don't know. You'd need a legislature that's willing to comply with the law. You would need, obviously, a constitutional amendment to get on the ballot, and I think there's a heavy lift there, and it would require Tallahassee, which, as I said, isn't always friendly to blue areas, to play nice, which may or may not happen.
Yeah, the challenge with any of that is you're going to run into the Florida Supreme Court, which is really far right now. So, you can bypass the legislature with a constitutional amendment in some cases, but you can't get past the Florida Supreme Court when it comes to interpreting it, which is sort of why I wouldn't pin a lot of hopes on anti-gerrymandering stuff. I would really just throw it all into voter registration and voter mobilization.
Thank you all again very much, and please stay in your seats for the announcements, and I'm going to turn it over to Lee Rambo. Thank you.
Thank you, Patty. This presentation has really been a wake-up call on why it is so important to be active and fully engaged as members of the League. To our panelists and moderator, thank you. for reminding each of us the consequences of elections and what each of us must do to ensure our voice is heard. As I listened, what came to my mind is, am I voter ready? Are you voter ready? Let's do a quick check. Do you need to update your voter registration signature, phone number, or address? Have you renewed your vote by mail ballot request? Have you done that? That was over December 31st. Are you responding to action alerts? Susan is holding one up. Are you responding to action alerts from the League of Women Voters Florida? If you are a league member, you should be getting those in your inbox. If you're not, sign up. They are extremely important and may give us tips on when we need to send messages to our legislators. They make it very easy to do that. And this is part of what you pay for as a member, so take advantage of it. Do you read the Capitol report? That's published weekly during session, and that allows us as league members to know what issues we are fighting for up to the moment. If you answered no to any of these questions, then you have work to do. So let's all set an example for what it means to empower voters and defend democracy by acting now to be more fully engaged, as these panelists have said. There was a dizzying number of very important legislative items touched on here today. I tried to write a bit and I gave up. It is overwhelming. But if you want to take a deeper dive, I encourage you to join us next door at the library on the second floor, the community room, for Hot Topics Overtime. We'll start at 1:10, and the moderator for that 40-minute presentation or discussion will be our very own Charlie Williams. And I see a hand up from Gina Hall, our Voter Services co-chair. Did everybody hear, Gina? On your table is some help if you need to update your vote by mail. Our next Hot Topics session will be on Wednesday, June 14th, right here in this room at 11:30. If you get here early, you'll have time to eat lunch. So do join us for that. The topic will be Give Me Shelter, Innovative Solutions to Our Housing Crisis. And the League of Women Voters of Florida is actually planning on having its state convention right here in Orlando from June 2nd to June 4th. We are the largest league in the state, and we want to make sure we are a force at that convention. So if you have not signed up as a delegate or an attendee, please go to leagueofwomenvotersflorida.org and do so today. You can also go to our website. At the top of the page, Lisa Atkins has put a really easy and quick link, which I use to sign up. So come join us. We would also really appreciate your feedback on the program today, which I'm sure is going to be great, and our luncheon. If you can either scan the QR code that's here on the screen, or on your table, I believe, there's a sheet that has a QR code on it. You can scan that. That is an easy way to go to our survey feedback form. It will only take a minute. So please let us know what you think. We really appreciate and want to know your opinion so that we can continue to improve what we do. So if you are not a member and you're a guest today and you like what we're doing and what you heard, please go to our website, join up, become a member. We'd love to have you. If you are representing an organization, consider becoming a community partner. We'd love to explore ways that we can work with you and members of your organization. Last but not least, as the chair of the Fund Development Committee, I have to put this in, on your tables. If you like what we are doing, please consider making a gift to the League today or tomorrow. You can either use this envelope for a check, or on the back of the envelope, there's a QR code. You can scan it or go to our website and let us know what you think about what we're doing by supporting us. We thank you and hope to see you next month for Hot Topics and next door for Hot Topics Overtime. Have a great day.